of mysteries and many miseries. You know we're alive, I'm on the brink of self-destruction as I'm roaming from left and right to hell. An invitation to come disappear with every 1, 2, 3 steps on this dark stage. Raise your flag, march your bite, break your mask and show some pride. While this war saints are shivering down my broken spine. Wars and swords, tears and blood fill my heart, begin to rage as I laugh in this bloodbath we made. Can someone give me the answer to my question? Where's my soul? Where's my heart? Am I losing my own self? Don't you hesitate, go this way. I don't know and I don't care. Tell me, are you not entertained now? I'll just keep surviving, I just cannot hide it all. I am not a full of victim, I'll continue living in this misery-driven world.
Get busy living or get busy dying. The 1st of January, 2100, Imperial Standard Calendar. New Haven, Tarkin, from the Tarkin Systems Directorate. It's a dark, rainy night on the colonial mining world of Tarkin. The small living block, which consists of one's commons room, a kitchen, a bath, and a bed, is bolted together at the seams, furnished and sealed to create a dark yet slightly welcoming view out of the rainy window. A small TV zaps on in the corner of the commons area. A blue backdrop and wooden desk bathes the room in light. A woman sits at the desk, smiling, wearing a blue pressed suit with a fixed bun. She smiles. Good morning, citizens of the Empire. My name is Janice Tannen, and you're watching the very first pilot episode of Empire Today. Our Imperator has thought fit to keep the good Imperial citizens updated directly from him and his cabinet. To do that, he has established a direct communication line, allowing us to get information directly from the will of the people. This is part of Imperator Reign VII's newest initiative to kick off the new century. He's calling it the 2100 Initiative. The massive overhaul will bring everything from territorial expansion to new mining jobs, to new technological advancement, and even the emergence of 2 whole new colonies. Imperator Reign VII has said to us himself that the 2100 Initiative is an effort to help jumpstart the CIS's position as a frontier empire, to become a galactic superpower, capable of handling any and all threats. The 2100 Initiative will be signed several hours from now, Vol Imperium time. Speaking of threats, the CIS battle group, Tarkin Guard, has recently encountered and eliminated several dozen Black Fleet pirate ships. Whilst the victory is sweet for those who died in the Tarkin Lunar Massacre, the Imperator and the High Military Commander urge everyone to stay vigilant, as they estimate that many more Black Fleet privateers lurk in the shadows. In other news, we're having some technical difficulties. The screen crackles and sputters as the image of the Empire Today newsroom is replaced with that of a dark metal nerve center. In the background, hyperlanes and nearby systems of the CIS sector can be displayed on an orange holographic wall map at a blue strategist table, displaying several green triangle units engaging in overwhelming numbers, with several red triangles, shows skirmishes across the CIS frontier playing out. The screen crackles, a result of the Empire Today communications crew attempting to regain control of the unsecured network. Before they can, a man, swept back hair, dressed in a military uniform, steps in front of the screen. Several of the people behind him working at various stations of the nerve center bear the same uniform. It is not Imperial military. A crudely made black skull patch adorns his right shoulder. Underneath it, an old Tulan military flag and a Moldarian authoritarian state flag are stitched underneath it, running down his right tricep. Centuries-old symbols carried by those who thought it wise to stand against the Imperator. Only their ashes remain. Imperial citizens of the Confederation of Enslaved Systems, listen and listen well. The man speaks with a purpose, A Mariposan accent lines his gums. He speaks with a highly militant attitude. The Imperator who claims to serve you is nothing but a god king, sitting upon a throne of skulls and death. His lapdog, Ivan Krukov, is a mass murderer who has been given stars and an army of unlimited bodies to live out his psychotic tendencies. Their justification for war against those who dared strike out on their own and live their own lives, free from imperial intervention and enslavement, is vile. The Imperator's lineage, the Reign dynasty, has been responsible for the genocide and death of hundreds of millions. We are those who have survived his onslaught and rose from the ashes. We are those who oppose his devilish rule and seek to defeat him. We are those who have learned the hard lesson that to defeat the Emperor on the Black Throne, we must burn his empire to the ground. Val, Tarkin, all enslaved planets will live under gunpoint and breathe under the permission of the Black Fleet. This is not a threat. This is not a boast. It's a promise. Blade Eternum. The man, the leader of the Black Fleet, known solely as the Admiral, vanishes from the screen. The network returns to a shot of the newsroom. Janice Tannen, now looking nervous, her pale Imperial skin looking several shades more red. She clears her throat, reshuffling her papers. Back to our regularly scheduled broadcast. Colonization for New Recon and New Odinic are entering the final stages of preparation, volunteering to journey to the newest colonies in the Empire and helping to birth the new generation will be rewarded with not only free housing and property, but tax cuts for every 2 children born. If you live on a frosty peak of New Odinic or start a farm in the alpine valleys of New Raycon, contact your local colonization liaison. The colonization of Blade will commence in several days. If you wish to be a part of the second wave, volunteers will receive job opportunities, greatly decreased taxation, and the opportunity to receive their own commemorative Talon R7. A sound shakes the very ground that the small Tarkin shack is built on. A cup of water placed on the nearby table ripples as the TV sputters a bit from the large impact. The quake is followed by another one, and then another, and suddenly a small siren can be heard as the man sitting on the couch watching the TV gets up. Walking over to the windows. As he pulls back the blinds, we hear a blood-curdling scream. Ah! The outline of a body being thrown at window height of the second-story apartment can be seen through the shadows lining the apartment walls, caused by the bright floodlights dotting the colonial city's walls. The walls are several meters high, concrete and reinforced metal, with a banister that is manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by the local Imperial military. Said military can now be heard locking and loading magazines as an infantry sergeant shouts, "A Spatzul!" Chemrail gun fire can be heard as all of their standard issue Talon R7s light up the gigantic lizard. The silhouette of it leaping and grabbing an infantryman from the wall, shaking him violently in his jaws as further gunfire tears apart his flesh, can be seen dancing around the shadows of the room. The man darts from the window, running over to a nearby end table and grabbing his helmet. He whips open a closet, grabbing his Talon R7, loading a 40-round magazine as he forces his door open. His boots can be heard down the hall as he stomps outside to join the fight. The monitor continues. Remember, a better life among the stars. CIS Imperial Palace, the Imperator's Wing, the 2nd of January, 2100 Imperial Standard Calendar. A grim, dark man stands in an elevator, hands held behind his back as he watches the red numbers count from the negatives. He's been watching that number tick down. Tick up, if he was being accurate. His ascent from the sublevels always took long. So long he'd forgotten he'd been standing in that elevator for around 15 minutes. The Imperial Palace has been through hell. Wars, invasion, assaults. More battles have happened here than some garrisons, and that's saying something when garrisons are tested daily by pirates, insurgents, and local, peaceful fauna. He ponders this all as he runs his hand through his hair, starting to turn gray, yet somehow there. He places his service cap back on his head, the 5 stars matching the 5 adorning his shoulder pads. The elevator finally hits 0, and Krukov walks out. "Sir!" A Hellfire corpsman in his garrison attire says, acknowledging the high military commander. He gives the customary Imperial military motion, a balled fist, which slaps firmly into the chest above the heart. A motion for all Imperial servicemen to remember where theirs is, so that they never become the monsters that they had to destroy in the past. He gives this gesture to many who pass him by. He can name every single rank. He started all the way down at the very bottom. Initiate. He remembers the Tulan invasion. So many in his unit died. He earned through blood, dirt, and experience. Sergeant, then staff sergeant, gunnery sergeant. And by the time he was forced to pull from the Imperium, he had left a warden. And now, here he is, 360 plus years old, a 5-star general, the only 5-star general in the Imperial military, the high military commander. He ponders this all in the long walk down the hall. Up the stairs, down another hall, past the war room, the vice minister's room, the chief of the senate, and the head of the Congress's room. Finally, he finds himself at the top middle study/office at the end of the east wing, the wing that looks out over the city of the Imperium and the old CIS heartland. He knocks twice. Enter. A man who rivals him in sheer presence answers. Krukov scratches his beard again, coughing hard into his arm as he enters the Imperator's study. The Imperator himself is at his desk, typing on the desk's holoboard. He chuckles. Finally getting old, Ivan? Krukov doesn't smile, but takes off his cap, shoving it halfway into his back pocket. If the Reaper wanted me dead, my Imperator, he would have taken me long ago. The Imperator scoffs. You calling me that out of respect or to annoy me? Krukov has seen 4 to 5 generations of Imperators rise and fall over the Aether knows how long. As such, he's earned the right to be able to drop the customs when near the Imperator, especially after the last 34 years. Rain the 7th and Krukov had worked together on many occasions. So, I heard 2100 got approved. Nice work, Krukov said, walking to the window, staring out at the hive city of the Imperium. I laid it all out for the Congress, every single detail. They agreed with me that our future depends on how we act on our expansionist needs and solidifying ourselves, the Imperator said, finishing up his file. Krukov grimly chuckled. Yeah, that whole Rainic day was a nice touch, too. Never forgive, never forget, Ivan, the Imperator said, standing up from his chair. Oh, I wasn't disagreeing. Anyways, the Blade landing party is ready to do as we live, breathe, and bullshit right now. The Imperator moved the 2100 file to the Darknet line to the Empire Today, submitting the public version for the whole Empire to see and bear witness to. Then I say it's time we get going. The 2100 Initiative. Some details. For the good of the people of the Confederation of the Imperium systems, to secure their future, to break of the shackles and the ashes of the past, to start a new life and build a future for our children, we must establish ourselves as the last good nation in our universe. We must reach out to distant star systems and secure our dominion. We must strengthen our legions and prepare for the coming wars of the Black Fleet, the insurgents, and more. We must carve out a star empire for the good of the Empire, for the good of the people. Piece 1. Dominion over the Graveyard Belt and systems surrounding the Vaughn system will be established and decreed. Said Dominion is a large area spanning several hyperlanes, and news and information of this will be broadcasted 24/7 on unencrypted ciphernet warning on all incoming and outgoing forces that can receive it. Piece 2. 2 new colonization efforts will be furthered. The new Raycon initiative on an alpine world, and the new Odnik initiative on an Arctic world. Such initiatives were already written up, but started 3 years ago. The goal is to have them ready by next year. Piece 3. The Blade initiative will convert Blade into a fully fledged mining colony, Aspiring colonists and pioneers will be given land grants and transported to the planet en masse. Likewise, the Tarkin Belt will be mined en masse as the next immediate mining project for the system. Piece 4. Probes will be sent to 10 worlds that will be mining worlds like Blade. 3 in the Thorvos system and 3 in the Sol Rock system. Piece 5. The Imperial military will start construction on new shipyards above Blade, as well as several new battleships, dreadnoughts, a new carrier, and the first stages of beginning the construction of the OBP. The shipyard is estimated to take 10 months. Piece 6. Galactic piracy and spice privateering committed by the Black Fleet will be cracked down on by every single Imperial Navy battle group. Piece 7. 10 scouting drones will be sent off. 5 will go up the northward hyperlane belt, and 5 will journey through the graveyard belt. Their goal is to scan distant systems and act on the theory of alien life in the universe. Piece 8. The burning of Raynik will be officially commissioned as a new national holiday. A burning of Vladimir Raynik will be held in the megalopolis city of Mariposa. Piece 9. Empire Today, a civilian-run, state-sponsored television program that gives live information, feed, and notices to the Imperial people on the goings-on of the government, starts today at 1800 hours. Piece 10. The development of the first gate station at the Galactic Southeast Hyperlane exit from Tarkin, meant to regulate all incoming ships coming from the Graveyard Belt, and to safeguard the system against future acts of piracy and raids. Piece 11. The IMA, the Office of the Imperial Military Affairs, will be given a sizable grant to further Imperial military development and several research projects, including, but not limited to, advanced robotics, cloning, theoretical faster-than-light technology, and advanced surveillance on the Tarkin wormhole. Every directive and motion from this act will be carried out effective immediately, and every line has been brought up and approved by the Imperial Civilian Congress. By my right as the Imperator of the Confederation of Imperium Systems, I hereby authorize this 2100 initiative to begin our new journey into the century. Imperator Lincoln reigned the 7th. Vice Minister Danielle Welleck, Senate Head Marius Stahl, and High Military Commander Ivan Krukov. Imperium Eternum. End on notes of the 2100 initiative. Blade Orbital Station. Blade 2. The 4th of January, 2100, ISC. This has got to be the most single boring post in the entire Empire. The Blade Orbital Station was one of several lunar bases the CIS had constructed with the intention of enacting direct control over the systems it planned to colonize. For Blade and Blade 2, the situation was a little different. Despite the new Raycon and new Odinic colonization efforts being prepared to launch later that year, Blade was going to be colonized within a few days. That meant a sizable soldier garrison was already being deployed to the planet with the colonists and expeditionary forces. The 250,000 infantrymen on Blade's moon, the 50th Infantry Legion, were there for presence. For the moon they were based on wasn't any normal space rock. The various man-made craters and the scorched surface, viewable outside their windows, was a testament to the CIS's forcefulness when protecting its people. While they were there as a QRF for the planet, the real meaning of them sitting on the ashy graveyard of the Black Fleet's former moon base was more of a symbolic one, a dare to any and all enemies of the CIS who dared try and infringe upon the people's freedoms. To come and try. In the small nerve center dome of the BOS, several squads of infantry manned the command and control center for their monthly rotation. The dome was where several green monitors, terminals, surrounding a large half-donut command console, all underneath an even larger main monitor which gave real-time analysis of the moon's general status. All of this was thanks to the high-tech satellites and real-time radar pings lining every sector of the moon, was to show any and all movement around Blade 2. The hums of computers and the once-in-a-while beeping was broken up by a radio setting on a clear portion of the main command console's desktop. A male voice, very cordial and upbeat, spoke. This one's going out to the 217th Hellfire, currently stationed on Tarkin 2. Stay safe out there, boys, and come home soon. A melodic rock synthwave compilation of music followed. Whilst many of the soldiers were busy monitoring incoming communications calls and surveying the data of Blade 2's status on the screen, others were using the downtime to conduct necessary tasks. Whilst one soldier at the main console was doing his job, the other corpsman next to him was leaning back, sharpening a large, curved machete. On the far side of the room, a soldier disassembled his R-40, a machine gun, and was conducting weapons maintenance, using the heavy-duty cleaner and part of a torn-up poncho to clean off old chemrail propellant. A more senior soldier, a staff sergeant, leaned back in his chair as he sat in front of a set of BOS outer perimeter cameras. A small device in his hand, the sergeant looked over and saw an old family holovid playing. "Staff Sergeant?" the sergeant said, catching his squad leader's attention. He looked up. "Sergeant Merritt. Doing good things for the Empire?" "Staring at a graveyard, listening to the ghosts whisper through the camera microphones, as always, Staff Sergeant," the sergeant joked. A few meters away, a corporal spun around in his chair. "You don't actually believe that stuff, do you, Sergeant?" The staff sergeant shoved his device back into one of his uniform pockets, grabbed the joystick, moving it around, rotating the camera currently selected. "Don't matter what you believe, son. All I know is this. Nothing can hear you scream in the vacuum of space, and we constantly hear talking through the microphones. Couldn't it just be radio transmission somehow getting intercepted?" The sergeant spun in his chair. "Alexei!" he shouted. From the command console, a soldier sharpening his machete poked his head up. "Sergeant, is there any known phenomena that causes cyber freaks to be picked up by orbital station microphones?" "Negative, Sergeant." The sergeant spun back round to the corporal, then to his own terminal. "The universe is a much stranger place than you would think, Corporal." The corporal shrugged as he turned back to his monitor. The sergeant peered out over at the staff sergeant. "So, how's the family, Staff Sergeant?" "They're good. Thinking about visiting Mariposa when we finish up this and go on post-rotation leave. Apparently they got that one UCD fight. Gregor's fighting—" "Attention! Gunnery Sergeant on deck!" a Lance Initiate shouted as all in the room were quickly snapping out of their seats to attention. "Carry on, you fucking knuckleheads! You're monitoring this goddamn base, remember?" The staff sergeant and sergeant knew this and hadn't moved, while some of the newer guys sheepishly sat back into their seats and continued their duties. Their platoon sergeant, Gunnery Sergeant Daughtery, standing the average Imperial height of 7 foot 4 inches, was more of the imposing man, mostly due to his stocky nature. He stepped up to the command console. The radio operator, Alexei, quickly placed his machete down on the countertop and rolled over to his monitor. Daughtery picked up the blade, checking at the fine edge and inspecting the Lance Initiate sharpening. "You ever think about getting one of those Harkon Raptors, Alexei? Newest edition is a curved blade, meant to go down on a son of a bitch's spinal cavity." The Lance Initiate loosened up, sliding back and pulling out a secondary knife, a flat Tanto-style one, handing it to the Gunnery Sergeant in its sheath. "Was, but I wanted to try this one out, Gunnery. Post store down on Sub 2 recently got these," the Lance Initiate said. He quickly placed the machete back in its sheath. Across the way, the gunner had quickly reassembled his R-40 in under 20 seconds. The Gunnery Sergeant peered over at the other soldier at the console, an Initiate. "Initiate!" The Initiate spun around in his chair at the Gunnery Sergeant's call. "Gunnery Sergeant, who does the devil call when he needs backup?" he asked. The Lance Initiate gave a knowing look. "The Corps, Gunnery Sergeant. Out fucking standing, Initiate. Do you know who Gregor Roland is fighting soon?" "This one newer heavyweight, Gunnery Sergeant. Brazo Diabel, the newer fighter from the Tulan districts." "A corpsman of fucking culture. Glad to see you following the national sport of our great empire. Death matches. Tell me, who's winning and how?" "While Diabel has an unarmed specialization, weapons are authorized in the champion's discretion, and Roland has a warhammer," the Lance Initiate butted in. "Gregor Roland via domination, Gunnery." Suddenly, a flashing blue light coming from the large overhead monitor snapped everyone back into reality. Anyone who had previously been fucking off collectively unfucked themselves. The gunnery sergeant handed the lance initiate back his knife, and stepped back as his platoon went to work. He peered over at the most senior staff sergeant. "What's going on?" "The blade colonists are leaving now, gunnery." Daughtery shook his head. "Would have been nice to let us fucking know. Fucking fleet. Alright, well, wave goodbye, boys. Hope there are no super lizards down on the surface like Targan." Daughtery thought back to those early days, back whenever he was just a corporal. He remembered how he was one of the torch party heading to the ground first to secure a foothold on the jungle surface. He remembers how his assault lander hit technical difficulties when a creature seemed to bonsai the fuck out of their engine, causing a crash landing. He also remembers how his safety harness malfunctioned, and he probably would have hit the ground hard had it not been for the Commander General Marks grabbing him and saving him from being sucked into the atmosphere. His mind also thought back to that terrible first year on Tarkin. Sure, once main CIS forces hit the ground, it was a goddamn slaughter for the lizards, but for those opening few weeks, data was incredibly insufficient. No one told him about the Spetzuls, a tiring, hyper-lethal, carnivorous lizard the size of a shock hammer that could easily tear apart a shadow raptor. And they would learn that they were also hyper-intelligent. Not to mention the flesh-eating virus that officially never happened. The Hell Dragons, the simian men that were forced to hunt into extinction. Daughtery snapped back into reality, realizing that he'd been standing there, arms crossed for so long, with his mind stuck in the past, that the entire event had ended. The Blade Torch Party had successfully left Blade 2 and had entered the atmosphere. Whether or not Blade 2 would be as bad as Tarkin remained to be seen, but if it was, well, he was okay with taking a backseat on colonization efforts just this once. Black Fleet Supply Base, Eastern Galactic Tarkin Belt, the 12th of February, 2100, Imperial Standard Calendar. "So, what have we got?" The CIS Admiral, Adrian Wolf, crossed his arms as he stared out of the bridge of the No Alternative, an Odin-class dreadnought and the pride of the Imperial Navy. "Scouts indicate that the shipyard of the asteroid base they're using is fully stocked, Admiral, but so far no indications of signs of life." The report from his craft's executive officer gave pause to the Imperial Navy's head admiral. "That's impossible. We had heat signatures all over that damn rock." He shook his head. The XO continued. "As of several hours ago, all life seems to have ceased to exist. No cause indicated. Ground parties ready to board the station and assault on your mark." Admiral Wolf looked out over the asteroid belt. The large asteroid with metal dockyards and ships visibly docked on it could be seen even from their far-off position. It would be easier to do what they did back on Blade 2, what he was ordered to. Wolf hears the Imperator's voice echo through his head even today. He was at a leader's summit, part of Operation Moonkiller, when Imperator Reign VII was holographically projected, as was Commander General Marks, Commander General Navarus, and High Military Commander Ivan Krukov. The Imperator walked in a circle, making angered gestures and knife-handling the commanders and admirals as he spoke. There was a very real, very raw rage to it. It wasn't evil. It was righteous. "Those monsters have spilled innocent Imperial blood. They are justifying killing over 30 people because of spice and resource shipments. So we will do what is necessary. We shall do what is right. I don't care if they think they're freedom fighters. I don't care if they think they're hard, tough, or heroes. We're going to go to there, and we're going to burn that whole fucking rock down to its core. And we're going to salt the earth so that even their squirrels run into dark space and they never come back. Understood?" Both of the commander generals were silent. Even Adrian's tongue was caught as the Imperator stared daggers into all of them. The only person to answer, as always, was Krukov. "It will be done, my Imperator." Adrian remembers the day Krukov was promoted and given position as the notorious high military commander of the CIS Imperial military. They were both far younger men, but he believed that he had the army general beaten in the experience department. He was wrong, or at least the Imperator thought so. He would learn in the coming centuries why the Imperator didn't think so, why he knew so. Every single Imperator from 4 to 7. Adrian rubbed his temples. Send them in. Aboard the No Alternative, several gunships were being loaded with Hellfire corpsmen. Back in the barracks, the men were loud, and the mess hall they were rowdy. Loading up into those gunships and watching the doors close, silent. Even as enemy fire impacted their positions, even as explosions would rock their trenches and freshly dug death pits, they remained calm, they remained focused, they remained vigilant, silent. A Hellfire captain loaded onto the gunship, commander of Alpha Company, Anthrax Company. As the doors shut, cutting off the brightly lit hangars where support personnel and naval crewmen rushed around to prepare the takeoff procedures, darkness enveloped them, and then the lights on the gunship zapped on. Grabbing the overhead handles, they felt the craft shake and rock as it took off, the sounds of other gunships following them. Inside the captain's head, a voice spoke. No signs of life indicated. However, if you encounter anything, Admiral Wolf says to contact him immediately. The captain nodded. Roger. He shook his head as a gunnery sergeant next to him perked up. Navymen fly, corpsmen die. The gunship rocked violently as it banked around several smaller asteroids. The file formation broke off as they quickly entered the hangar port of the asteroid base. Forming a circle formation, the red light suddenly flashed green. The captain looked around as his chalk-dropped crew. Get lethal! The doors facing the inside of the circle opened up as the corpsmen poured out, quickly securing and fortifying the openings between the gunships with gunners and heavy infantry. The captain linked up with the lieutenants and gunnery sergeants leading the two platoons, the first and the second, 160 personnel in total. Have every chalk but two cut back and get more of the boys. Other two stay here. Spread out, secure the hangar. A silent nod came from the two platoon command teams as they quickly picked up their men and had them spread out. The two remaining gunships had their front-facing guns aimed at the far end of the hangar, and the rest peeled off. That led the captain and his executive officer, the more senior lieutenant. The LT's eyes were caught by something on the ground. Sir? The captain turned and walked up to him. What is it? Without a word, the LT simply pointed down. It was a privateer of the Black Fleet, face down dead on the floor. The captain nodded his head a bit, and the XO aimed his rifle, flipping him over with a foot. The captain backed off and aimed. The eyes of the body were gone, almost dried out. The front of his head was cut open in an almost perfect square. Too perfect for any camera round. He knelt down, grabbing the top of the man's head. The inside of the head was empty. Everything inside gone. The man's cheeks were sucked inwards as he dropped the head. The sickening hollow sound could be heard from within his helmet. The LT tapped the back of the captain's leg with his boot. Sir, around us. The captain then realized what most of the objects dotting the hangar were. Not crates full of supplies, not weapons, not sandbags. Bodies. One privateer's eyes were burned out. Brown, still smoldering pits where his eyes should have been. Another had the back of his head cut out. The inside of it cleaned right down to the membrane. All of them in various conditions of... The real threat wasn't the privateers. It's why their life signatures were gone. Something had killed them. All of them. Something else. The captain hopped into his helmet comms. Stay sharp! Send it down with your men's. There's almost a definite third up for. Don't bodies. Roger that, sir. My last one. Didn't have to tell me twice. The captain made his way across the hangar as several squads from the first platoon stacked up on the doorway. A 6-man fire team stacked up, divided on both sides of the door. A breachman was inspecting a possible breach points as a rifleman was trying to access the keypad. Staff Sergeant? The captain approached the staff sergeant. Their squad leader spun around as his men worked. Your men ready? Always, sir. The door blasted open as the breachman detonated the explosive putty he had placed in the cracks of the door, the large metal rectangles blowing off towards the inside. Hellfire Corps rifle teams poured in, one after another. Their green lasers and helmet lights lit up the dark hallways. The captain approached the scout unit, currently scanning down the hallways with their heat scopes. Any signs? Could be an ambush. The Force Recon scout shook his head. Negative, sir. The entire area is cold, just like when we landed. We can't see through we can see through bunkers with this thing. We'd be able to see every guy in here. A redundant question, since the Admiral's scans of the base brought nothing. But it didn't make sense. The hangar looked ransacked. Black Fleet privateers were in various states of dissected, lobotomized, had their brains removed. Then he saw the several bodies near the door, all laid on their backs, rifles in their hands as they faced towards the doors. Others faced outwards, slumped forward like they died running. The same pattern persisted all over the hangar. It wasn't an outside threat, it was an inside one. The captain quickly snapped back to his comms as he'd rushed after the fire teams as they cleared through. All points. It wasn't something from the outside. Something killed these fuckers from within. Stay sharp. No craft left, so it's still here. The captain passed several soldiers as they held doorways, cover points on the hall, and tried to drag even more bodies out of the way. All around the halls, the death continued. Windows, boards, and furniture was destroyed and thrown around. Privateers were killed in even more gruesome ways. Limbs missing, holes cut cleanly through faces, jaws missing. The wound spots that should have been there were cleanly cauterized. He broke his gaze from them. If he didn't focus, his men would be joining the dead down there. His comms sparked to life as he hopped over. Sir, 1-7, we got something here. The captain met the 1st Platoon Gunnery Sergeant in a large supply bay deep within the base. The signs of battle grew worse and worse the deeper they went. The amount of privateer bodies was through the roof. They already knew that there was a lot more men who flew under the Black Fleet's banner. They just never saw this many dead. That wasn't because of CIS intervention. The doors to the supply bay looked like they were torn out of the walls. The near 5-inch steel plates were thrown down the hall, crushing privateers underneath. The captain stepped onto it to cross over. The uneasiness underneath it shifted because of the bodies being crushed underneath them. They came upon 1-7, 1st Platoon's Gunnery Sergeant. He shook his head as he looked over at another Black Fleeter body. Sir, I said you could always count on 1st. We found your little pirate, Captain. He pointed down at the body of a mangled privateer. His nose removed, and small pieces of gray matter indicated his brain was pulled out through his missing nasal passages. And the source of it all. The gunnery sergeant pointed to the back wall of the supply room. There, several Hellfire corpsmen were aiming their weapons at a large stone container. Even under the dim, flickering light, the several dozen green lasers helped illuminate the sarcophagus. It was metal, worn but still very much smooth to the touch on the outside. An unvolley marking lined the outside, as the box seemed to mimic that of a body. A strange skull, no eye holes, nose, but a large gaping mouth hung halfway down the top cover of the coffin. Inside, nothing. Just dry specks of white material and clear substance lining the inside of it. The captain walked closer, and the gunnery sergeant motioned to one of the weapons squad gunners who turned on the tack light on his mounted weapon. Under white light, the captain was able to get a better view. This is the source? Aye, sir. Looking at the way all the bodies are laid out, all seeming to look over here. Plus is the end of the line. The base only goes this deep. Well then, Lieutenant, where do you think this mystery assailant went? He asked his XO. As both pondered this, a voice shouted from the far side of the room. Gunnery, over here! The gunnery sergeant ran over to the right corner of the room, and the captain and the XO followed. The 1st Platoon lieutenant and a few riflemen were busy hauling a large crate out of the way. Pushing it back from the center of a wall revealed a small open area. A large ventilation shaft was torn clean off, tossed up against the side of a shipping connex. The gunnery sergeant approached, unafraid, shining his helmet lamp down the shaft. He shook his head. Nah, yet, no fucking way anything fit down there. I could barely fit down there with their kit dropped. He stood up. Then a large commotion could be heard through all the metal walls coming from the hangar, so loud every single corpsman stopped to look. The captain's comms lit up. Sir, we got all 4-3! All 4-3 in the hangar! He's up! The line cut out just as the captain was sprinting back through the hall, several rifle squads tracking along behind. Listen up, you fucking demons! Anything that's not Imperial, I want to remove from this fucking station! Several Raws could be heard through their exos moaning and humming. Finally, the sound of gunfire was right on top of them, as several riflemen could be seen outside of the door firing at something. A Hellfire corpsman standing at the doorway attempting to drag his wounded buddy to cover was struck dead in the chest by a blast of white energy, knocking him flat on his back. The captain and the XO quickly grabbed the two men and began to drag them into a makeshift casualty care room in the hall. The gunnery sergeant rushed forward, beckoning squalls of his platoon to follow close behind. Even though, out the dozens of bootfalls stomping down the hall to get into the hangar, the captain could hear him. "I wanted that motherfucker dead 5 mics ago! Get the fuck on it!" The gunfire increased tenfold as the captain and the XO dragged the wounded men into the room. Several medics were already working on over 8 other injured, and 2 took over as they rushed to join the fight in the hangar. The captain called it up. "NA actual, this is Anthrax Leave. We have enemy Op 4 in the hangar. I say again, enemy Op 4, hangar 8, Cass." The captain was barely dodged by a blast of energy as he dove behind a nearby Connex with his XO. A gunner near them yelled, "We clipped him! We clipped that creepy fucker!" The captain peered around to see the fainted silhouette of a horrifying white figure, evading behind a Connex on the other side. A team leader silently motioned for his grenadier to take position in the open while he shielded him to provide covering fire. The grenadier loaded a flechette round into his rotary grenade launcher, firing it, and it hit with precise accuracy in the area behind the Connex. As the loud thoom sounded, followed by the thousands of metal shrapnel hitting all sides as the corpsman ducked for cover. And the screech. That fucking screech. The XO would tell the captain later he'd hear it in his night terrors till the day he died. A weapons squad set up their guns, teams, on top of 2 Connexes as the 1st Platoon gunnery sergeant pushed up with 2 rifle squads. The captain called a rifle team up. Both forces would move quickly, with precision, rifles high as they approached the Connex. As both stopped just before either end of the Connex, the gunnery sergeant nodded to the captain, and both pushed around to either end, and, well, what lay before them, curled up on a ball in the ground, wasn't a privateer, it wasn't a Blackfleeter, it wasn't even Imperial, it was... Is that a fucking demon? Well, the XO put it best. The thing was taller than the CIS, far taller. Its frame was skinny, and its arms were bony, yet sagged with ancient flaking skin. It was sickening white, only furthered by the oozing milk substance now pouring onto the ground. The captain dropped his rifle when he saw its face. The skin was wrapped tight around the skull, so tight that he could see every single vein. And, well, what it had for bones in its neck and jaw. The jaw was gaping, much like its coffin. The eyes... Its skin got more transparent near the nose and cheeks so you could see through it, and it had no eyes. It just had skin pulled over. And yet it raised its head to look at the captain. They seemed to look at each other for a moment. Its gaze was non-existent, and yet the captain could swear it was staring directly into his black Imperial soul. A flechette shard stuck deep into his forehead, and he could feel its emotion. Bitter hatred toward its captain and his species, rage toward its now inevitable doom, and a shot right through the back of its head, causing a massive hole to punch clean through the front of it. Its disgusting innards, rotten bones, and rancid pasta-looking cerebral cortexes all splattered on the captain's black armor. The creature fell back, and its left hand fizzled, and the energy left in it, showing it was mere seconds from blasting the captain at point blank. The captain's gaze rose to see the gunnery sergeant lower his rifle, nodding to the captain. As plenty of men broke off to take up security positions, the captain hopped back on his comms. "This is Anthrax Lead. Contact NA Actual. We have a situation." Blade, Tarkin System Directorate, CIS Space, the 5th of January, 2100, Imperial Standard Calendar. 1 minute until planetfall! Repeat, 1 minute until planetfall! The assault lander was the first of the Imperial forces to touch down on the surface of Blade, the Torch Party. Despite all drone and satellite analysis, the 65th Hellfire Legion would find out up close and personal whether or not the planet was actually uninhabited. The corpsmen were locked in their seats as the assault lander made its way to the ground. The harsh, foggy air and the atmospheric adjustment caused it to jump, fall, and shake. Though it was near the size of a warehouse, it still unnerved many on board. One wrong move and it could tear apart. An object in one of the engines could cause it to plummet and kill them all. The Commander General was on board. Commander Marks found that out up close and personal. He was there as the Torch Party leader on Tarkin all those years ago. He was sitting in the very same seat he was on that assault lander. He was there when the large reptilian bird kamikazed its way into the fucking engine. He also remembered nearly being pulled from his seat as he held on to an initiate's arm for dear life to keep him from being sucked out. Not something one would think back on as Mark sat in his seat, head back, far more comfortable than the rest of his men. But then again, the whole incident did make him fear flying and landing a lot less. What do you fear after something like that? The whole assault lander lurched forward as it found its landing position. As it stabilized in the air, all the corpsmen looked around. Regulation standards says that you are to remain locked in your seat until the craft has stabilized and landed. The commander noted this as he unlocked himself and grabbed his rifle and pack. As his men looked around, he headed for the bay exit. Stay cold! Stay lethal! The actual landings and disembarking took a lot less time than anyone would expect. The corpsmen quickly rushed to their transports and vehicles, ready to go in less than 8 minutes. Support, logistics, and colonization personnel were loaded onto the armored transport soon after at the 10-minute mark. ATISM mechs were activated and would join Commander Marks as he and the company were at a drop ramp ready to go in 12 minutes. The ramp slowly lowered, and his mind flashed back to those horrid first hours on Tarkin. Hell dragons, 20-meter-long dragons that would swim in the peat bogs, that rushed their cargo ramp, stick bugs that pretended to be trees, one of which stuck his personal machine gunner through the heart. He always kept a gunner by his side in case he found himself exposed. He would lead from the front, which also made him a target. His old gunner on Tarkin was a good man which he saw slowly die as he and a medic tried hopelessly to clot and treat a mortal wound. The gunner of his fire team attached to him prepared his chain gun. The rotary barrel spun as he dry tested it. Wait for my signal. On me. As the ramp touched down, sinking into the murky, watery swamp floor, he saw the horizon in front of him. The air was filled with fog, shown to be mildly poisonous with all of the old emissions and chemicals in the air from unknown origins. The ground was a swamp, flat with trees every 40 meters, creating an empty and desolate view in front. All eyes waited for him, and he gave a signal, and they followed him down the ramp as he marched forward, rifle up. History remembers that expeditionary leader Joachim Sirkim was the first man to step foot on Tarkin. The landing site has a statue commemorated to him. Those who were there remembered that Commander General Marks was the first actual man on Tarkin. Those who were on Blade now remember him as well, as the first men to step foot on Blade. His boots sinking almost knee-deep into the bog as his men joined him set the tone for the next few hours. Thank God for layered suits. The men adjusted well to the environment. A landing camp at around 300 by 600 meters was established. The assault lander's original landing spot for the landing zone for the next shuttles down. The corpsmen started to set up patrols, and large ATISM mechs were the main batteries before shockhammers and behemoth joined them down there as well. A strange compliment for what was supposed to be a lifeless planet. But as the Imperial military army says, peace through superior firepower. Commander, Alpha has received contact in the northwest. Commander Marks turned to the Lance Initiate, breathing heavy and covered in bog. It was clear that before proper communications could be set up, that he had to run 300 meters here. Even with an exo, through the rough terrain and the distance, it was a tall order. Marks turned to the Colonial Environment Specialist. Looks like your paranoid assumptions must have been right, ma'am. Commander, we must be careful. We're a new entity in the ecosystem. Violently killing off the wildlife could disrupt the planet in a number of ways. We don't want it to evolve into another Tarkin. Marks loaded a 40-round mag into his Talon R7, slapping the bolt release. All due respect, ma'am, this planet was supposed to be dead. Well, it seems that the glorious military was wrong. She was interrupted by a Lance Initiate. All due respect, ma'am, it's not wildlife, it's a fucking Xeno. Both the CES and the Commander Marks turned to him slightly, and he straightened up. All due respect, sir. Alright, on me. Let's go welcome the neighbors to CIS territory. Marks' fire team and an ATISM mech, along with the CES, followed the Lance Initiate to Alpha Company's AO. Over the last several hours, engineers had been busy working on the outer defenses. Trenches and sandbags were emplaced as metal walls were beginning to be erected. All of said emplacements were manned as every single hailfire on their end was watching the horizon. Commander Marks was saluted by the company commander and the XO as he entered the bunker. Captain, Lieutenant, what have we got? One of our teams spotted it not too long ago, sir. Several figures running beyond the marsh. We thought it could have been light bouncing off the trees, the commander interrupted. This early in the morning. Sun's barely breaking through. He continued to watch the dim horizon. Our valiant LT voices his concerns, Commander. When we scanned the area with heat optics, we found a bunch of figures running around, some in the prone, all of them watching us. The reality of the situation made itself very clear as not a goddamn person, from the commander to the very vocal CES, spoke up. What they have for weapons, the lieutenant interjected. Unknown, sir. We didn't pick up any we thought were, but then again it's alien life, could very well be beyond our conceptualization. The CES approached the bunker's viewport. Commander, all due respect, we should try to establish contact. You don't even know if they have weapons. If we just engage, we could start a war that costs too much. The commander pondered these options. As the Torch Party lead, he was authorized to make these executive decisions in the absence of a colonial government. His men tried to assure him it was a bad idea. His men tried to assure him that it could get him and many others killed. He assured his men he didn't make it to Commander General by listening to the whims of anxious men with rifles. The ATISM mech was to his left, scanning the dark horizon with its flood heights. To his right, men advanced. Despite what the CES liaison tried to advise, he had them keep their weapons at the low ready. Suddenly a movement in the bog 10 meters, and the mech's lights snap onto it. One of the riflemen and his team leader have their weapons up. There it is. If that motherfucker has a gun, I will light him up. Put your fucking weapons down! The commander's voice boomed. He stared out into the peat bog, and the reflective eyes of the being in front poked out of the swampy mess of their planet. The sergeant of the fire team was now muttering in a low tone as his men kept their weapons down, but ready. The floodlight illuminated the creature. It stared at the mech, and then at Marks. Marks took his hand off the pistol grip of his weapon, waving to it. He didn't know if it would even work. He might have just declared war in their native language. It then stood up. All of them got a good look at it. It was around their height, maybe bigger, and it had a crustacean-like appearance. Like the ice water sea animals fishermen would pull up from the depths of Val's surface, or the ones they'd pick from the rivers of Tarkin. Some smaller abdominal arms were tucked close into its body, and its eyes were reflective. Then more stood up, one to its left, another to its right, some small, some gigantic, all of them unarmed. This wasn't first contact, it was a welcome party. Commander Marks held out his right hand as he approached the creature. His men were stunned. Even the liaison who hid behind nearby trees was as well. The Hellfire Corps commander, veteran of many battles, first man on Tarkin, first man on Blade, trudged through the water as what can be seen as several dozen of the creatures stared at him, unmoving, unwavering. He stopped just a couple meters away. He sized up to the creature. He reckoned if it did turn sour, his frame and exosuit would allow him to tear its arm off. His hatchet would help him subdue it as he readied his weapon. He could probably take down several more with his rifle before his men even got theirs up. They could have the whole goddamn group dead. His military calculus, his warrior mind, every single soldier in the Imperial military analyzes threats before they do diplomacy. So it was a strange moment when a member, a Legion commander of the most decorated and feared infantry specialization, raised his hand to the Xeno. It was a gesture of theirs that spoke back through the eons, grabbing your brother by his forearm as he grabbed yours, helping him up the mountains, pulling him from the ground or out of their trenches and death holes. Politicians used it as a way to set the tone, no hostility between them. The creature looked down at the hand. Maybe somewhere deep down in its culture it had something similar. Or maybe it was just consciousness putting two and two together. But a war photographer would capture the moment when Commander General Marks and one of the Hermaian senior councilmen shook hands, flanked on both sides by their respected people, and it would be remembered for all time.
Where no Wesson has tread before. The Imperial Palace, Rhine, 7:30 p.m., January 5th, 2100 ISC. The sound of a loud thump resounded through the personal study of Kaiser Livius Rex Aurelian. The Kaiser stopped his writing as he glanced without moving his head at the gloved hand holding down a sealed scroll before him. The gloved hand belonged to none other than his co-Kaiser, James V. James? I got it. The very same piece of information that will end our little disagreement. Kaiser Livius sighed, a hand coming up to pinch the bridge of his nose. The freckles on his nose and cheeks distorted by the action oh so gently. And what may that be? He looked up to the raven-haired Kaiser, who was practically vibrating from his excitement shining in his emerald eyes. Is it some soul-sent gift that just so happens to serve my means and help keep you from reducing the Navy? Then yes it is. Kaiser James enjoyed watching his ginger-haired co-Kaiser glare at him, angered blue eyes meeting mirthful green. Like a gift from Sol himself, and I brought it here personally to rub it in my face? No. I just wanted to present it to you and see how it destroys your plans and possibly get to watch how your face can turn into those tomatoes you enjoy snacking on. Kaiser James opened the scroll, clearing his throat out as he read out the contents to Kaiser Livius. An unknown radio signal has come from the same direction as the newly found planet that could contain Vanguard presence. Naval presence is needed to inspect this signal as per Athena's recommendation. Speaking of Athena, she hasn't deciphered it just yet, but still. Kaiser Livius tapped his pen on the document before him, uncaring of the little blobs of ink he left behind. So, because there was a possible Vanguard presence that might be near the planet we just found and are going on an expedition towards magically comes into play right as I get done telling you all 20 reasons on why we need to downsize the Navy, you write this information down on a scroll to take to me personally instead of emailing me just so you can act smug about it. Yes, asshole. That is Kaiser asshole to you. I'm the same rank as you, he mused quietly, cupping his hands around his face, burying away the gross shame he was about to display. James, he began, unaware of all the ways his old friend was about to ruin his sensible plans. I know exactly what you're going to say. But Fives, we gotta assemble the general staff. We gotta make a plan. We have to do all the procedures. Blah, blah, blah. We could go bankrupt. What? That genuinely caught him off guard. The economy of the Imperial Federation was in stunning health. The fact that it could even default on any of its debts was a laughing matter. Yet here Kaiser James was being stared down by his lifelong friend with very serious intent in his sapphire eyes. The air of camaraderie was almost gone as the tone very quickly became more serious. What do you mean we could default on our debts? That is not what I said. I said we could go bankrupt, not default, Livius corrected, almost annoyed. Potato! Get to the point! James snapped back. Cooling himself, Livius stood from his desk. Look, the Reichstag approved a giant bill that would allow us to tap into the reserves to create a colonial incentive to help repopulate Aliska. In doing so, they appropriated some military spending for additional colonial efforts. The Reichstag wants colonies, and someone has to pay for them. So, the military's budget is getting gypped over it? That's what you're saying? Livius could only nod at his now apoplectic friend. The military could go bankrupt because our ability to pay bills has been snubbed by some dweebs to colonize some backwater fucking... Livius had to cut him off before he could continue. I think there is enough money in the budget for one expedition. Just one. Will it even matter at this point? James would ask, almost defeated. If you can find another planet with a population that needs our efforts for reconstruction, we can appropriate funds from elsewhere and not need to demobilize. Bonus points if we need to patrol the sector. With a grin, James snapped his boot heels and saluted his old friend and co-Kaiser. The soul wills it! I will keep our armed forces alive, soul damn it! Levis could only nod. He was too tired at this point. He was missing dinner. Oh, go make a task force. Consider it an Imperial decree. Now there is something we can agree on, James replied before facing and marching out the door. Imperial Federation General Staff Headquarters, Rhine, January 6, 2100 ISC. So, we have a shitty situation, and I'm going to be honest with you about it. Kaiser James was quick to get to the point before his staff. Alexander Tukhachevsky, Augustine de Lacy Sr., and Konstantin Spire, the three most brilliant men in the Reichswehr, who also happened to be in the same Reichswehr he was sure was going to be downsized soon. The number guys in the department of keeping our books balanced and not fucking us over have fucked us over. Joy. Admiral de Lacy uttered out, standing at ease before his Kaiser. Turns out, they want to downsize the Navy because some asshole decided to take from our budget to fund the colonization efforts for Aliska, instead of getting them from anywhere else. Trust me, I'm as pissed about it as all of you most likely are. Kaiser James sharply turned to the side and began to pace. What? There's some good news, and some more bad news, so as a favor from me to all of you fine gentlemen, which would you prefer to hear first? Give us the good news. I've had Reichstag representatives crawl up my arse for the past 2 years, telling me the budget for the Navy is overblown. Alexander Tukhachevsky stated flatly. He had been through too much in his life to be reduced to some bureaucrat whose sole job is to be a crony to the Reichstag. Alright, good news it is too, bitch or data man! James paced back to his original spot. Turns out, we have enough time and resources to go on one more expedition, and if we find out the planet that we are heading to has a need for colonization efforts, then they will take the money from some other department, and not the Navy. Yes, I was surprised about that too. Which makes me wonder why they do that in the first place. He shrugged. C'est la vie. Alright, now the bad news. Spire would ask, the only hopeful party at the table. There might be possible Vanguard presence there. We kicked their ass once, we will ram a giant tungsten slug up their ass again! Exclaimed the Lord Field Marshal. What's the plan? Him using his thick Kusar accent. Kaiser James grinned at his three-man staff. Plan? He turned to them again, arms spread wide open. The plan is, we ride in there, guns blazing, and if there are Vanguard there, we destroy them like we did before. Perhaps push for some colonization on that planet as well. It's a win-win situation here! And we kill Vanguard, and we get a second planet! And, even better, the pencil pushers will think twice than to take money from our budget! So, wait, began de Lacy Sr. What if we need to provide humanitarian aid? You read about the crisis and did the simulations. We can't just go in full bore with shells loaded to every bulkhead. Continuing, he postulated, what if what we are facing is not just Vanguard, but a full-blown post-invasion fuckfest? The only saving grace is that they are 1 light year out, but that's still a massive 5-month journey. Surely you have thought about this. Of course I read about the crisis! He did not read about the crisis. But what if we don't go in full bore, What if we need every last shell? What if it is a full-blown invasion? We don't get a recon team! We get ourselves and then a message traffic data from Athena. That's it! The plan would be to, what? Figure out what the situation is? You can't expect to leave for 5 months with just another reconnoitre as your plan. Spire would state professionally, his experience and wisdom guiding his words here. Let's think about this as less a military expedition and more like the local apartment tenant asking his neighbors if they are missing anything because he is about to go to the shops. DeLacy would nod, summoning the holo projection of his first fleet. We go in 2 parts, split into 4 task forces each. Spire states, creating a rough draft. The first part will consist of a light section and FA section, guarding precious cargo. The second will be the same, but with 2 heavy sections and the Bellona as overall fleet command. That gives us flexibility and reduces risk of any supply lines being cut off. What about translators? Has the Tech Brotherhood labs got anything special in that department? DeLacy would ask the Kaiser. Funny you mentioned that. Kaiser James motioned over to a nearby Brotherhood member, a lanky man who looked half-organic. Tell them what you told me. The half-organic man nodded, showing a small device, circular and looking like it could easily be placed on a flat surface. We have developed a device that can translate and decipher speech and language the more it is used and exposed to a new language. The more we can get the native speaking, the more of these that are activated, the more data it collects, and the more we can speak to the natives. Language is all just a game of patterns and sequences, so we can easily go back and forth between Nordreiter and Südreiter as easily as a practiced linguist can. With enough data, then we will be able to do the same with the Kamikians. But it will need field testing. Or do your men know Kamikian enough from the radio bubble to piece together some part of their language? DeLacy pressed. Yes, we do. From what we have gathered so far from the signals, we were able to decipher what we had on hand, which is how we know this will work. We have basic rules and patterns down. It just needs more experience and a larger pool to tap from. Then I am satisfied. DeLacy would finish, looking to Spire for any further notes. Spire would only shake his head and state, so long as we can get enough cargo transport for this, I have no complaints. Tukacheski would knock his fist on the table. I will spin this in a good way to the Reichstag with Livius. This is our last shot before we are forced to have any other big thing. Good luck, gentlemen. Plan this, and plan it well. Well, looks like we have a plan. Everyone, get ready to move out, and let's go save our budget. And along the way, help some Xenos, and maybe be heroes, and destroy some Vanguard. Kaiser James eloquently spoke, nodding to his staff and leaving them behind, already awaiting for the first sight of Kamiki, and possibly Vanguard battle. And saving their budget. Rhine Spaceport, 12 o'clock p.m., February 3rd, 2100 ISC. Notice to the engine department. We are transitioning to Phase 3 preparation of departure. The lights of the hangar switched on, the harsh fluorescent bulbs illuminating the black lettering of Bellona on this gray beast of a machine, dormant in her massive locking lugs. Traffic control report. No contacts observed in the area. With that, the locking lugs shunted with a massive click, unlocking. Bellona's downward thrusting engines whirred in protest, keeping the ship's balance. Damage control personnel, shift observation of major sectors to alert level 2. Stabilizing cables and other wires kept Bellona stable and secured within the facility began to disconnect and dangle, like a puppet being freed from his strings. No warning signals or shutdown notices for our departure. Data link with Control Center is ongoing. The major LCD screens on board her bridge began to light up, signaling that Bellona was under her own power, and the bridge has full control. Kaiserbund Kriegsmarine, checklist for reactor and control systems complete. Barked the helmsman, pressing some buttons on his control and holo panels. All fleet's request for a departure signal has received the following response. He continued as he grabbed the control joystick, Athena recognizing his handprint. Com 1, Bellona permission granted. Comply with regulation departure speed on current heading. Enter orbit at your fleet's discretion. The main engines of the Bellona howled, screaming with its distinctive high-pitched ion engines. The directional thrusters aim at the helmsman's guidance and begin to produce gigajoules of thrust. The massive command ship lurches forward at first, then begins to gradually accelerate out of the titanic hangar. I have control. Bologna is now at in-port pilot mode, advancing at departure speed. When the giant ship reaches a critical acceleration, she exits the open hangar doors and noses up, climbing hundreds of feet in seconds. Outside is a spectacular show of large metal tubes glistening in the airspace above. The force assembled before its flagship, the so-called First Fleet Expeditionary Force, begins to assemble in its predetermined task forces. This would later please Kaiser James Blackfire V, sitting in the command throne of the Bologna. Such a force has only ever been assembled with such purpose near 20 years ago. The invasion of Alaska. Times before him, he suckled on a teat while his father led troops to glory on their celestial neighbor, he mused to himself. Now it really is my time, he mutters, drawing the attention of his chief of staff to his side. Sir? The young officer would ask, unsure if the Kaiser was speaking to him or merely muttering. All the task forces of the fleet assembled in all good order, the Kaiser asked him directly. Aye, sir. They await your instruction, the chief of staff would respond sharply, reaffirming his standing at attention during his procedure. Then, with all due haste, set our course for the Newport News orbital dockyards! James V snapped, long awaited his time to give such an order, the first on their journey. Soul wills it! Aye, sir! Helmsman, set course for Newport News bearing 315, planes up 30 degrees. All ahead full, light the burners at your discretion, fleet will follow. But the helmsman echoing his orders, the Bologna and her escorts, cruising at a flat trajectory, suddenly nose up sharply, their ion engines absolutely screaming in protest before they begin to kick back against their ships. Their altitude continued to increase and increase until about 45,000 meters, the afterburners kicked on. 6 solid fuel boosters inside the command ship's engine nacelles began to stream columns of white exhaust, making Titan's upper atmosphere resemble the palace of the gods. The fleet as a whole swiftly followed their flagship's lead and began to make for orbit. They all knew that this was their first clambering steps into a wider galaxy. Newport News Orbital Dockyard, 7:30 a.m., February 4th, 2100 ISC. Let's get this show on the road! Aye, sir! Replied the crew to their Kaiser, their emperor, their leader. Then, all at once, the bridge was ablaze with activity, the likes of which had only been seen 20 years prior. Fleet-wide computers rapidly selecting course and trajectory. When all was said and done, the RCS thrusters began to move the Bologna and the rest of the fleet to a new heading. One that only had one destination. That star within a stone's throw of Sol Invictus. The home system of the Kaiserbund. Begin charging auxiliary power banks for breach, the head navigator replied, as all the internal light fixtures throughout the fleet began to brighten. Some lesser light bulbs actually began to shatter, so untested was this final attempt at proper faster-than-light travel. Bolts of static electricity began to arc and lick the hulls of all ships that was in the task force. Charging complete! Prepare for breach! Some collision alarm! The helmsman yells over the commotion as the master klaxon began to bleat out. Outside, though away from prying eyes, a purple-rimmed tear began to open in the void outside. Time and light began to bend at its arrival, as all the ships in the fleet began to accelerate into these breaches into space-time, thinning their massive frames smaller and smaller by the bending light before disappearing into the collapsing rip. The Bologna herself was one of the last to accelerate into her own personal rift, the crew feeling heavier after a slight shunt that would knock unprepared people off their feet before a return to normalcy. The fleet was finally away from their 1-month journey to their next-door neighbor. In orbit of Kamiki, March 4th, 2100, ISC. Stand by for launch! Contact actual is 003 mics. I say again, 003 mics. Unknown if there are OP4 on planet. Civilian presence is minimal. You are not weapons free. Break! That was the captain shouting over the intense whine of the ion engines that were revving up to power. Soon they would be launched out of the hangar and into space, destined for the planet's surface. It would be hot, they were briefed, and there were no signs of Vanguard contacts yet, but that had been the same case for Alaska. Over the comms came the individual strike teams calling readiness. This group, Delta Team, or the Devastator Squad, sounded off its own readiness before its dropship was violently accelerated out into the void. Contact actual in 0025 mics. They had been looking upwards towards the sky. Some were busy chewing on fruit. Some were napping, while only a few did their job and looked up and around their post. No one took guard duty seriously after the other 3 peoples died. No one was left to kill. So now, they lazed about in guard duty and stood around for minimal pay. They wanted to kill something. Why skyboxes up there? One guard pointed upwards. The alert Kamikians quickly shined from a bored, dull blue to a bright and vibrant orange glow of concern and curiosity. Indeed, there were flying skyboxes. But where are their blades? Shouldn't there be blades swirling around to make it fly? How can skyboxes fly without the blades? Is there something in there that they can kill? Not sure. You and me will go and see where it lands. He looked to one of the other 2 alert guards. And you will stay and wake up the others! Quickly changing from a bright orange to a sickly green. Oh, I don't want to. They're eating and then they're gonna be cranky and... Shut up and do your job! The leader turned a bright red, glaring at the sickly green glow, whom slowly changed to a weird green-orange mix. Now, follow me! The 2 guards left, leaving the 1 alert and about 6 others lazing about. He then turned red and started kicking them in their sides, shouting at them to wake up. Final check, Taktisch werden and Marines! Yelled the captain. Aye, sir! Came the resounding response as bolts slammed forward, chambering a single slug. 10 seconds! Came from the pilots as they began to turn on hover mode, gliding to the wide field they had selected as their landing zone. Heinrich, your comms got static, came from the platoon's weapons corporal before the grenadier responded. Got it. Line clear. Red light. Stand by. A tense atmosphere filled the dropship. They knew they would not be dropping under fire, but still, it was tense. They were once again about to drop into unknown grass and soil. They were bound by honor and duty. This was their solemn task. Green light! The side doors slammed open. Blinding light filled the dropship. That and the heat. It was almost oppressively hot, before the humidity finally set in. The Marines' thermal rigs kicked in to try and keep them at a relatively cool 80 degrees Fahrenheit, but it was taxing. Boots hit the soil. Men from all over the battalion and the 16 dropships sent to land them in this field began to spread out, taking position to cover the dropships and creating a more solid LZ. Next would be the cargo dropships containing translators and more diplomatically inclined personnel. But they were to secure this land. By soul, that's what they were going to do. Oh, they were huge! There were many not-Kamikians coming out from the skyboxes, and each of them were huge! They were taller than the Kamikians, almost double their height, wearing weird armor with a weird tube coming from where their faces should be. They looked to be wearing heavy cloth, with some plates on their shoulders, chest, and shins that matched their helmets. Long jackets that reached their knees, boots that looked like they were wrapped. Heavy gloves and some type of pack on their backs, carrying strange guns. I want to kill them, spoke the guard, ignoring his leader who was holding him down and keeping him from charging in. An excited red, pink, and purple glow coming from his pores and eyes, practically vibrating at the idea of killing. His leader wasn't far behind, but at least he had to sense the whole back and realize that there were 2 of them and over 60-ish of them. Good thing they were hiding in the remains of an old and forgotten machine, the moss and shell hiding them quite effectively. I want to kill them too, but we can't. We are outnumbered. But... Kill! His subordinate let out a low whine, already breathing heavily with a half-lidded look on his face. Please! Can't we just find a little one? Leave us alone! That shouldn't be too hard, right? We can just kill one, right? He was practically panting, as if in the middle of a certain strenuous activity. I know! Kill! But we need to get others. Then we kill, yeah? He had to admit, his subordinate's eagerness to kill, rip, and tear was Infectious. Oh, it had been so long. Maybe just kill one? Just one can tie them over, right? Please, please, we haven't killed anything in so long! The other one was speaking again, lone whines escaping him. Please, 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 please! Damn it, he wanted to kill too! They both wanted to kill! Let's wait until one is close enough then. Let's wait until one is close enough then. The leader grinned ferally, turning the same red, pink, and purple as his subordinate. They both breathed heavily, imagining all the ways they can tear into those sky people. Would they bleed red? Blue? Maybe green. Oh, or would it be their last glow color? Oh, they were salivating at the idea. Blue 4 has secured the area. Send down additional friendlies. The captain, Herman Snop, said tersely into his helmet comms. We have no contacts at present and are preparing for a wider scan of the area. Silence. Someone from far above was responding to him. Aye, sir. We will continue with the operation. His men began to fan out and search the area, as more and more dropships began to deploy. Soon, there would be an entire company, 316 fighting Marines here to secure this old abandoned farm. Remember, Marines, defensive fire only. We are guests and allies, not conquerors. Captain Snops reminded his men. Aye, sir! They advanced everywhere through the fields toward the barn. Had to get unloaded. Light equipment already began to get unloaded. Some got to work laying new crate landing pads. Others cut the tall grass so everyone could see better. The Delta team would notice 2 heat signatures on the drones they sent up. The specialist technician would radio the captain. Sir, I think we have locals on contact. Orders? Approach them. You have translators? Aye, sir. Delta squad approached the heat signatures, hands on the ready and holding their weapons just in case. The soldier on point led the squad closer to the signatures. Approaching what he could guess used to be some machine of sorts that could move once. With all the moss and smaller pink trees growing over it, he figured it was impossible to use anymore. Hello? Identify yourself. The rest of Delta Squad quickly raised their guns when the 2 heat signatures burst from the contraption, screeching and holding onto their own bolt-action rifles and bayonets, swarming onto their sergeant and attempting to murder him with the most disgusting smiles on their faces. What the actual fuck?! In the span of only a second, they were doing their best to tear him apart and stab him as hard as they could, clawing at his armor as he stumbled back. Fucking shoot them! After the first shot roared out, what followed made the rest of the squad hesitate for a second longer. It moaned when it was shot! After their hesitation, they continued to shoot at these panting, happy, moaning monsters until they stopped moving, leaving glowing blood on the ground around them and smiles on their faces. What in the actual fucking name of soul was that? The squad medic chirped, visibly distraught. Command, we have a, situation. So, run this by me again, Sergeant, replied the Major. He had already had to repeat this story several times in merely the past few hours. The Sergeant was clearly getting annoyed. Sir, the locals attacked me with serious vicious intent. We had made our intentions clear, and they still attacked us. When we fired on the creature, it moaned, sir. We terminated them in good order and reported the incident to command, sir. Just like the LT, the captain, and all other sergeants before him, the Major put his face into his hands, wishing to rub his eyes through their face mask. Let's pretend that didn't happen, then. Send the bodies to autopsy and let the Brotherhood goons gawk over them. Continue with the operation. Aye, sir. Back to business as usual. They saluted each other before returning to their field of operations. With the Major organizing the battalion as a whole, as it was now hard at work creating a landing zone for the rest of the personnel they would need, and the Sergeant going back to his squad to further execute the mission before them. Contact with the locals hadn't really begun in earnest yet anyway. No military force had yet to come to oppose them, or no curious locals had come to pry and see what was going on. It would seem like the mission would need to be loaded up into APCs and finding a town, and hopefully going from there. Do any of you know which way Kai and Togu went? The team of guards shook their heads. Some were still asleep on their feet, and one was nervously inhaling peaches. Their new squad leader sighed. He had a bad feeling about this. Togu was really twitchy today, so maybe he dragged Kai into a fight? He certainly hoped not. He didn't want to have to deal with their angry wives if something happened to them. All right. Let's just go towards where the skyboxes were and go from there. Stop eating! One of the Kamikians chewed and swallowed his latest peach, shining a pale blue-purple.
Sorry, Hero. I just... they smell so good.
If they were in the middle of the Great War, he was sure Punchy would be killed and eaten for rashes for how useless he was.
Just stay in the back, Punchy. Everyone else, behind me.
Instead of approaching the skyboxes from the open field, they'd take cover behind the trees and the broken machines. They could get closer that way and figure out what's going on from there. They were silent. Only the sound of the crunching grass and fungus accompanied them as they approached the skyboxes, and soon realized the Sky People. Their first thoughts were how big they were. The second, how weird they looked. And third, how many there were.
How could they approach this? And where are Kai and Togu?
The Marines were loading into their APCs. They located the nearest town with recon and were about to haul ass towards it, until the perimeter control informed them about a group of locals gathering on the outskirts of the now established HQ. A new squad was fetched and sent to make contact to them, to bring the locals in. They would be sent with Brotherhood of Tech members to ensure ease of communication, and were ordered to have one main set of questions on their minds. Who are you? What are you? Are the Vanguard attacking you? Who are your leaders that we can talk to?
Why are Sky People so weird?
Hiro was unsure of how they knew Kamikian, but they spoke in a weird accent and they could only understand about half the words they spoke. They just came up to them and started speaking to them. Some sounded kind of angry, some curious, some were pointing guns at them. Hiro had no idea what to do and how to approach this. Crunch! Hiro blinked and shone a bright orange, confusion on his face as he looked behind him and saw Punchy nervously eating a peach, shedding a green-orange glow. The silence between them all only grew as Punchy kept eating, looking to Hiro, who was incredulous, the Sky People, who they couldn't see an expression on, and the rest of the guard, who were all shining a bright orange, all confused as well. Then, ever so slowly, Punchy reached into his pack and pulled another peach out and paused. He looked at Hiro, and the Sky People, then back to Hiro. He shuffled closer to the Sky People, and just reached out a small hand to them, offering them a peach as he nervously chewed his own. The sergeant sighed. He liked the Aleskian first contact more. No bullshit, just shooting. They had weapons. Obsolete bolt actions chambered for a round that was way too big for them. But the symbol was innocent enough, and he gingerly took the peach. Squatting down as he looked this creature in the eye, he spoke in such a way for the translator in his helmet to convey the simplest of messages. Are your people in danger? To his surprise, the fruit-chewing specimen before him would offer him a gesture that led him to believe he said no. So, he asked another question. Could you show me who is in charge of your people? James had been sitting in the Imperial shuttle for about 3 hours at this point. Once his ground teams had said they made contact, he needed to be prepared to endure the planet's intense heat. So, there he was, being miserable, with the shuttle's climate control set to the area that he will be landing in. The amount of water within his camelback was helping, but his face was definitely sweating balls. Though, finally, he believed he got used to it. And, being informed that officials from Kamiki were waiting for him, he ordered the pilots to begin the takeoff sequence. After an additional 45 or so minutes, he could feel the craft touch down, and its ramp began to lower. Blinding light filling the bay and illuminating him and his guards. It became hotter almost instantly. As hot as Soul's balls out here. One soldier was heard muttering. Just their luck that they arrive on Kamiki during their summer, a much hotter season that puts the summer season on Titan to shame. Mind yourself, Marine, the Kaiser responded. We are in a foreign land. Who knows what we'll see. He finishes as the ramp finally clings onto the ground below, the sound of metal on stone pathways resounding through the massive courtyard before the tall and imposing palace and capital city of Kamiki. The palace was the only place in all of Kamiki that looked to use more than just basic wood, stone, and thatch for the building. Clay, stone, tile made the fortress-like palace stand out around the city or surrounding it. And in the city were the countless Kamikians outside their homes and staring up at the Imperials like a dark sea with glowing lights of suspicion. Still hot as balls here. Sweaty, sticky, horribly hot balls. As soon as this was over with, the Kaiser was sure he would jump into an ice bath as soon as possible. But for now, he had to meet with their leader, who was standing before her palace and surrounded by armored and armed guards. Standing only barely around 5 feet tall, she still cut an imposing figure, wearing heavy robes that dragged onto the ground around her, and left her head unadorned. Long black hair that hung loosely and straight. A pair of fierce-looking horns curled around the sides of her head, all accompanied by a set of eyes that glowed a bright, calm light blue. "You are... Kaiser?" She spoke softly, gently, barely louder than the whisper of a breeze. "I am the Kaiser James V, one of 2 who rule the Imperial Federation." He spoke resolutely, cutting through the air with assurance. "You are the leader of your people." Bowing only slightly, yet never taking her eyes off of him. "I am, Kaiser. I am Kaguya Hime, Empress of Kameki. The characters that make my name are Radiance, Knight, and Ruler." Oh, yeah. Names have meaning, he would think to himself, unsure how to respond before having an idea. "My name is derived from my great-great-great-great-grandfather. I do not know of their meaning, but I know he was a great man, and that my father found me worthy of his name. Accept my apology." "You have been given a name with much to live up to. I pray that you shall exceed those expectations, and bring new meaning to your name." "We all hope for those expectations, Empress. It is up to Sol Invictus to grant us the chances." A small smile. "I find your kind does not like the oppressive heat of Kameki. Perhaps we may convene here for your delicate conditions. The inside of my palace can be quite humid and uncomfortable during the summer." "We may convene wherever you wish. Your safety is my concern. To that end, I would wish to skip these pleasantries and get to the point. Our technicians have intercepted the radio transmissions of your people, and they are one of combat." He pauses to gauge her reaction. "Are your people in any danger? Has there been any extraterrestrial invaders recently?" "Kaiser James, you have misunderstood. You are the first ever contact Kameki has had of extraterrestrials. The radio waves you have intercepted were of war and violence, yes. However, the conflict has been resolved. Just a matter of war amongst the peoples of Kameki. Trivial, really, in the grand scheme." The sky blue bled into a purple tinged with red. Hiding something? Or keeping silent? "Regardless, the threats that brought our people low were known to have left in this direction. Your people are in great danger. We offer our friendship to protect you from these dangers, if you are willing." She was silent, looking towards her guards who all shone in a rapid succession of colors, long and pointed ears twitching in all manner. She watched them, then raised a hand that caused all of them to stop and bow their heads in deference. "I want all terms in writing, but for now, this is agreeable." "Something will be prepared for you," he would respond. "Should you seek further cooperation with our people, I will be honored to show you the benefits and the pitfalls of collaboration with us. I am certain that the future for both of us shall be mutual in nature." He bowed again. "I am sure there are many benefits. I wait eagerly to see them. However, it is not done to make a deal with one when there are 2 in a bargain. I want to meet your second Kaiser, and until I do, the official treaty cannot be drawn up." "He is inundated with work at present. Perhaps you would consider a visit to our homeworld? Speak before our Reichstag and speak to him as well. We'll be honored by your presence. Surely you would have someone who would watch over affairs in your absence. Most monarchs do." She let out a small laugh, almost silently. "My House of Lords shall look over my home and people while I'm away. We do have the ability to take care of ourselves when our leader is needed elsewhere." She quieted, then turned to an uneasy blue and purple. "Know this, Kaiser. I am surprised you are so willing to accommodate my people and I. However, do not take us for pets. If this alliance has any chance to succeed, we expect to be treated fairly and honorably." She goes quiet and speaks softly, almost impossible to hear. "We are not cattle either." "That goes without saying, Highness. All peoples of our Federation are equals. We have no intention of being unnecessarily aggressive to anyone," he stated, almost proud of it. "How else would we expect anyone to come to our aid if we treated our friends as lessers?"
A noble idea. One that I can understand and breathe easily, knowing it is your core tenet. She then began to step closer, her guards forming lines on her left and right. I shall see to it that I meet your co-Kaiser. There is much to be done, and until I meet with him, nothing can go forward. When she approached, she spoke gently again, her color bleeding into a red pink. The last time we were betrayed, it did not end well for them. She then turned back to a sky blue, a serene smile on her face.
"I am certain that it was a price you would not pay any time soon either," he stated bluntly. "Make your preparations. I shall await for your signal for departure." Bowing deeply to her, he would return to orbit as she created her entourage. An ice bath was awaiting him, after all. Cybertronia, 2100, April 4th. Alphatron, these tasks you have me take, are you sure they are fitting for me? A red and blue robot standing on an elevated platform said, surrounded by consoles and holoscreens. "I am an archivist, yet you have me decoding these old data files. Would it not be better for others better suited to the task to decode these?" Alphatron turned to face the red and blue robot. "Orion, while I understand your concern, you are still my apprentice. I want you to be well versed in many skills, which in this case, decoding the data files from the vaults. Understand, Orion, that your task of archivist is still there. You just have another step to reach it. This will not be your task forever, but for now, you will undertake it." Orion went into thought before facing Alphatron once again, nodding. "I understand, Alphatron. I shall undertake this task with diligence then." February 4th. And thank you, fellow Cybertronians, for turning into your regular scheduled Titan Tunes. I'm your host, Jazz, and today we have some extraordinary guests. Jazz, I'm starting to think that you've been a bad pick for this mission. You're going to go native on us listening to that music. Take it easy, Sideswipe! Besides, they're the only species that have come up with some good tunes, so don't mind if I listen into them. Still remember why we're here. The last thing we need is this planet freaking out about it. Another voice joined in on the conversation. Take it easy, Sideswipe. I doubt any of us will go native. Besides, this planet is largely boring. I wish the Vanguard would show back up, and I get to show the Weston and the Vanguard what happens, that when they mess with the cliff, they get the horns. A final voice joined the conversation. Take it easy, Cliff Jumper. Besides, that would not only be our call that would need the War Force and High Council approval before we even get into that mess. Cliff Jumper replied. Let a bot dream, B. Let a bot dream. B answered back. Besides, thinking this planet is boring is a matter of perspective. Saw a couple of Imperial warships take off a cycle ago. Certainly it was a sight, but with you sticking to the backcountry and roads, your view is going to be a lot duller. Bumblebee's got a point, Cliff. This planet isn't all that bad. Bumblebee's got a point, Cliff. This planet isn't all that bad. They got some kickin' tunes, and you should interact with them more closely instead of driving around on the back road. May 7th. Alphatron found himself walking in Icon's higher places. The sounds of reconstruction and construction hitting his processors. He was glad to see all that was happening. Alphatron had been there since the first days of Cybertron, one of the first to come out of the creation pits that birthed many of the first Cybertronians. However, the cycles had changed the face of Cybertron. While the Council had remained steady in its rule, the data files he had been working through concerned him. The Vanguard's move on Titan several cycles ago did not help. It was worrying. Alphatron enjoyed the reports that he got from the recon team on Titan. He looked forward to seeing how all the species that were in the database were healthy and alive. He knew that Cybertron would make it. As he continued to walk about an icon, he noticed a familiar presence, one that was always nice to feel when he was walking around thinking. He turned around, looking for that presence. He knew it was there, finding it hiding away in a small notch in the structure of the icon. He held out his hand, opening it with a warm smile for the presence to fly out and land. The presence flew out of the notch, landing on his hand. A robotic insect. It was different from the last time he had seen one of these. A sign for those that saw and knew what they were, that their creator was watching. Alphatron, moving it closer to his face. I see you are worried just as I wonder how you would feel about the things to come. The insect looked around for a bit before flying off, the sound of jet engines scaring it away. Looking to the sound of jet engines to a skydive. Alphatron turned to face him. Skydive! I'm surprised to see you, along with you still holding that alt mode. Is there something I can help you with at this time? Skydive stood up. I hope I'm not bothering you this time, Alphatron, but I have a question in regard to Titan. Alphatron shook his head. Do not worry. I'm just taking this time to think. But what is your question for Titan? I understand that there was an amount of secrecy over our actions during that planet's fight with the Vanguard, along with the recon team, but he will not be returning to the planet. I cannot see this being well for any relation with them for the future. Alphatron looked concerned, placing his hand on Skydive. I can understand your concern, Skydive. However, worry not, the High Council will see any problem through. June 14th. Alphatron walked through the halls of the High Council chambers deep in thought. The long cycles of Cybertron's fall away from Titan back to isolationism was something that would soon become hard to maintain. In the 3 hyperlanes that ran from Titan, and given that Cybertron was one away, it was only a matter of time before Titan came their way. While that connection was not a problem for Cybertronians, they could withstand the cycles that would pass. It would be the best move for Cybertron to make the first real open move to Titan as Imperial Federation. Alphatron's thoughts carried him to the doors of the inner sanctum of the High Council. The hull guarded by Honor Guard, unmoving in their place, protecting the High Council for all cycles. 2 more stood by the door protecting the High Council. As Alphatron came to a stop at the door, the 2 guards came to attention and spoke thus. The High Council awaits you, Alphatron! Alphatron nodded before heading into the door and the chamber, heading to the center. The High Council acknowledges Alphatron. The council spoke in unison, a single voice resonating throughout the chamber. I once again call for the High Council to let open relations fall between Cybertron and the Imperial Federation. Surely you know and feel the changes that the solar winds carry. The data we have continued to find in the archives points to a greater threat, one that we know and had fought, and more that our creators... One member of the council spoke. The High Council sees no reason to guide Cybertron down this path. Our safeguard to these threats will be here on Cybertron. Titan's impact on us will not show. Titan's survival in its war against the Vanguard would not have affected Cybertron, nor our involvement theirs. Alphatron answered back. Yet the High Council and I know that the threats will become greater if we are not to tell them. Our help will be grateful to their survival. Titan species are strong, along with those that are similar in the stars. We must make it our mission to help their species before it escapes us. The chamber was quiet as the High Council thought, and Alphatron waited. Then another member spoke. The High Council will not back your actions, Alphatron. For the consequences you shall bear, neither that the High Council will stop your actions. Alphatron nodded. Thank you, High Council. Till all are one. Once again, the singular voice resonated throughout the chamber. Till all are one. Alphatron replied back before leaving the chamber.
Chapter 1. The Best Laid Plans. Virkuul Homefleet, the 1st of April, 2100 Imperial Standard Calendar. Just one more jump. A stocky and shorter than average Syrkin looks out over the vast spillage of black void that is the limits of Imperial Federation space. A missive had just been dispatched via hyperlink some time ago that the fleet was on its way to visit Titan, the home world of the Vestan peoples. It would be a time of great commerce, of great deliberation, and hopefully a time of excellently played diplomacy. Just one more jump, we can change our lives forever. No more running from place to place or looking for somewhere safe to stash our materials, our people, our wealth. One more jump and we'll finally have a place to give ourselves some footing against the horrors of this galaxy, and perhaps even spare ourselves from the humiliation of losing people to the Jewai. One more jump. Then a loud klaxon blares out of the loudspeakers on board the bridge. Jump initiation sequence, all mans, man your stations, T-minus 15 minutes till jump. 15 minutes of pure Syrkin chaos later, the jump drive on board the great Capital War Ark fires up, alongside the jump drives of some 40 other ships, and the largest fleet ever dispatched on a diplomatic mission. 3, 2, 1. The ink-black void fades away, and is replaced by an array of streaking bright light until... there it is. Great orbital defense platforms, ships swinging back and forth between the moon and the planet's surface. A shining beacon of hope for the Syrkin at the helm of this great and terrible fleet. And so we finally arrived at our new destiny, a distant Syrkin scoffs. Always so dramatic, eh, Gokeda? The Syrkin arises from their position at the helm and begins walking towards the exit of the bridge, while some of the ships of this great fleet enter stable orbit above the planet. I'm just looking forward to the vacation, laughs the Syrkin as she passes the fleet master, Gokeda Naid. Gokeda sighs, then laughs, the stocky Syrkin pivoting on his heels. Suppose it's good we aren't all about business, eh? He says, quickly passing the helmsman. I'll race you! The helmsman shouts as they both take down their corridor among the mass of tightly packed Syrkins waiting to get aboard the ships that would take them planetside. The city of Ryan, Titan, Imperial Federation. The 1st of April, 2100, Imperial Standard Calendar. The landing craft approached the ground quicker than the IF escorts would have preferred, but after a smooth landing and the disembarking of Gokeda Naid and his associated posse, the IF escorts peeled off to go follow another one of the hundreds of ships approaching the various large cities of the Federation's capital planet. The walk to the palace was gorgeous. Great gardens and marble fountains dotted the surrounding yard, with gold trim and steel perimeter fences casting a strong contrast to the greenery around it. The great marble pillars and the extraordinarily complicated architecture of the main entrance to this place was completely beyond anything Gokeda or his friend had ever seen. Despite the dizzying display of grandeur, the group quickly regained its composure and marched up the steps to the great hall, requesting permission to speak with one of the emperors of the Federation. After some time, a well-dressed Wesson man, surrounded by the best of the Federation's military, exits his massive palace and greets him. Gokeda deeply bows to the man standing before him, which makes him a little taken aback, and after a half-hearted bow, the man extends his hand to Gokeda and shakes it. The Syrkin looks down at the man and smiles. I am Gokeda Naid, Fleet Master of the Virkuul Homefleet. To which the man before him warmly responds. Kaiser Livius, Imperial Federation. Let's get you all inside, shall we? A walk through the palace was less intimidating through the outside, with hundreds of functionaries running around, making appointments, drafting bills. The inside of the palace, frankly, looked like a very dapper office, with most of the people inside being of a more common background than the one might think the prerequisite for working here actually was. After a few twists and turns, the Kaiser turns to the Syrkins and asks plainly, So, this business you wish to discuss, what is its nature? Gokeda looks around for a moment before responding. A wide-reaching and important policy is its nature, and I'd love to discuss it with you or anyone else you think needs to hear it once my companions are settled. Kaiser Livius nods and then sets a servant about making the other Syrkans comfortable in what looks like a massive debate hall turned ballroom. Afterwards, the Fleet Master and the Kaiser enter a small but comfortable cigar lounge of sorts, and after settling on one of the largest chairs in the room, Goketa pulls out a strange purple and green cigar of sorts and sets about smoking it. Acrid formaldehyde shifting its smell across the room to Kaiser Livius. Care for a drink, Fleet Master? The Syrkan takes a drag of the cigar and leans back in a chair. It's been far too long since I've had Titan brandy, if you'd be so kind. The Kaiser nods as he goes about fixing drinks. So, what was it exactly you wanted to discuss with me? After a small coughing fit, the Syrkan raises its head and rasps. You consider yourself to be the Fleet Master of your people? Kaiser Livius nods. I suppose you could see it that way, yes. A puzzled look crossing the Kaiser's face before the Syrkan continues. That would mean that you own land rights, yes? To which Kaiser Livius again nods, further puzzled. To an extent, yes. The Syrkan chuckles. Then I believe that there is a very beneficial deal to all parties involved to be made. The Syrkan pauses, and the clink of ice drowns out the noise and running of functionaries of bureaucrats. We have come across a significant cache of mortem salvage that we would be willing to trade in exchange for and to begin the construction of a plant-side manufacturing facility. The clinking of the glass stops as the Kaiser turns his head in awe. How much? The Syrkan looks into the eyes of the Kaiser and simply states, 3 million tons, and it could all be yours if you should feel so inclined. The Kaiser finishes making drinks and brings them over to the table closest to the Fleet Master, pulling up a seat, while the Syrkan takes another long drag of the cigar before continuing. My people would construct and man this facility, and in exchange we would take on apprenticeships from your population, and whatever experience or advanced manufacturing knowledge they glean from their time with us can be carried to the rest of your industry without blessing. Is this satisfactory? The Kaiser would take a long look at the Syrkan before nodding. Yeah, there is free territory on our moon Phobos, and after a bill is drafted, we can have this to the Reichstag in as little under 5 hours, powers be willing. The Kaiser waits for the Syrkan to respond, but he doesn't, instead smiling widely and leaning back. He takes a small tin out of his coat pocket and takes some pill before returning the tin to his coat. The Kaiser raises and takes a long drink. However, I also know your people to be nomads, so why would you want something like this? The Fleet Master looks at the Kaiser at a moment before sighing. I need somewhere to stash my shit, or take a rest. A hidey hole, frankly, safe from the powers of destruction that inhibit our galaxy. The Kaiser raises an eyebrow. And why not do this for free on some other world? There are plenty of habitable ones in the areas your people have ranged throughout the galaxy. The Syrkan laughs and downs the created drink in a moment. Because if I have to build it on unclaimed land, then I'm obligated to defend it. But if it's here in your capital system, no harm will befall it. Garrison and no. The Kaiser nods with understanding now. So you wish for us to defend this place, then? He places his chin in his hand, deep in thought for a moment before continuing. These terms are acceptable, but I have a favor to ask of you as well in part of ratifying this agreement. Goketa nods. Go on. The Kaiser begins pacing with his drink while he speaks. My government has made it a primary concern of ours to contact and build closer relationships with everyone in the known galaxy that isn't hostile. You could greatly aid us in this endeavor with your advanced knowledge of the stars. The Syrkan laughs. In my culture, information is one of the most highly prized commodities, it being one of the only ways to advance. The more you know, the more likely you'll join up with a crew or start your own. What could you give me in return? The Kaiser stands tall and looks out to the Syrkan, finishing off the last puffs of his cigar. The friendship of the Imperial Federation. The Syrkan chokes out a small laugh. Friendship is, unfortunately, not a commodity in my culture. The Kaiser takes a step closer to the Syrkin. Oh, but the friendship of the Imperial Federation is a commodity. Mutual defense, improper ratification would mean that your enemies are our enemies. You'd have proper legal documents stating that we need to protect your planet-side resources, unrestricted access through Imperial Federation space, and unlimited commercial contracts between our corporations, government, etc., etc. Once again, quite valuable to all parties involved. The Syrkin stands, now towering over the Western Emperor. Throw in a lease of 4 shipyards and you have a deal. The Kaiser nods graciously. I'll get all of this drafted and sent to the Reichstag immediately. In the meantime, feel free to stay for dinner and enjoy the hospitality of our people. The Syrkin turns to leave back towards his entourage, thanking the Kaiser before readying himself for the raucous party that was sure to ensue once this deal was ratified. Recon, CIS space, the 13th of April, 2100 Imperial Standard Calendar. The Great Fleet, at the behest of the warlord Shaljain Gonaid, made its way slowly but surely to the outskirts of the CIS space, as it has done many times before. It was not unusual to cross through CIS space for the Syrkins, but crossing was not what was intended for the current plan. This would be a first official contact between the Syrkins and these Imperials, who have been so keen on gobbling up as many nearby worlds as they possibly can. Since the Virkuul Homefleet's birth, the borders of the CIS have expanded farther and farther than most other nations in the galaxy, spurred on by some inescapable drive with military ships that the Syrkins wager could stand up to the Homefleet's best. It seemed intelligent to let this superpower in development know the intentions of the Syrkins, and maybe, just maybe, aid them in their quest for expansion in exchange for the untold riches this isolated state likely has. And so, while Gokeda Naid and the smaller portion of the fleet are busy playing diplomat fuck in the Federation space, it would be up to ye old Shalgel. Up to me, thought Shalgel, having some fundamental issues with diplomacy and the understanding of foreigners. He seemed ill-fit to the job. However, the words of Gokeda still rang in his head. I've done business with these people. They couldn't care less for your demeanor, your speech patterns, your style of ship, or what your name is even. They're like us. They value one thing. Can you get the job done? And I know that you can get any job done, my dear friend. The ships parked themselves in a system adjacent to the mining colony of Raycon, and eventually, after blasting the CIS with enough transmissions, garnered a response. This is Thermopylae Station. We have received your transmission. State your purpose. After niceties were traded, Shajel and, along with his entourage, were brought into contact with a terrifying man by the name of Ivan Krukov, the over-warlord of the CIS. Shajel was granted passage to Vol, the capital of the CIS, to meet with civilian representatives. The journey through space felt shorter than the journey through the capital complexes of the Imperium city, vast obsidian black towers and lines of men being drilled and formed up surrounded the old Syrkin like a whirlwind of insanity. You all don't slack on training, do you? Shajel jests to the uncomfortably disinterested soldier leading them through the complex. Simply shrugging off the question of the massive alien behind him, they arrived at a set of massive iron doors. He's, in there. I don't really know the protocol for entering since I haven't been inside, so, knock, I guess, the soldier replied, as he pivots and turns back down the hallway from which they came. Shajil takes out a Weta cigar and lights it before knocking 20 or so times on the door. After a long inhale from the Syrkin, the door slides open, revealing a rather moderately furnished study/war room. Entering the room at the behest of the overwarlord of the CIS, the Syrkin turns to gesture his posse to wait outside the door. Go make friends with those guys or something, Shajel mutters as he points to the 2 Iron Confederates guarding the massive door. As the pneumatic hum of the door buzzes shut behind him, Shajel sees the Iron Confederates looking at each other, and through the masks it was difficult to read expressions. He mused that finally, someone in this place was at least uncomfortable with the massive alien warlords waltzing about. You wish to see a civilian representative? The question snaps Shajel back to reality as he quickly turns and bows deeply. Yes, that was my intended goal. I assume that's you? The Sirkin gestures towards the large bearded man in the corner overlooking a hollow table. The man stands and nods, looking to the opposite corner, revealing Ivan Krukov. The general sat in front of his own respective hollow table display, seemingly reading up on the news. Ivan looks up from the hollow tables and stands, his gaze now fixed on the massive alien smoking in front of him. Shajal is more than a little visibly shaken, but regardless continues on in a chipper tone as possible. I've been dispatched by my Homefleet to offer up our services as mercenaries to your people. So whoever I need to speak to in order to sort all that out, I'd love to start as soon as Sandfall, yes? The large bearded man looks the Sirkin up and down again. I am Imperator Lincoln Rain, the Black Wolf, 7th of my name, and I am the will and fury of the people. So you are in the right place, alien. Shajal takes one more long hit off of his cigar before looking to the man in the corner and pointing. And you are Ivan Krukov, I assume? To which the general simply nods and steps closer to the Sirkins. You have a name? Ivan asks, cold, waiting for the things to turn suddenly violent, as they often do in this sector. The Sirkin smiles widely and displays both of his hands openly to the men in the room, wrist-mounted machine pistols folded into gauntlets in clear view. I am Shajalinen Gonaid, warlord of the Virkuul Homefleet, and proud member of the Sirkin species. Ivan and Rain look to one another for a moment before Ivan looks back at the Sirkin. You got something shorter? Shajal simply laughs while taking another step closer. You can call me Shajal. The tenseness in the room lessens now that all names and parties involved are known. Rain seats himself again, turning off the holo display on the table, and begins looking at various documents on a tablet drawn from his coat. Why now? The Sirkin looks at the man, puzzled. Care to elaborate, your Imperialness? Ivan chimes in, cutting off the Sirkin's sarcastic remark. Your people have passed through our territory some 100 times. But since you never shot at us, we never shot at you. Lord knows we have enough enemies already. And in all that time, never did you once make meaning effect. Rain finishes what he was reading on the tablet and looks back at the Sirkin. So, I ask again. Why now? Shajal's eyes dart around the room for a moment in a daze, remembering the reasons why contact was coming now instead of later was difficult. So the Sirkin just improv'd the hell out of it. You guys did shoot at us at one point, but then stopped, and then started shooting at each other. And then started expanding, and the shooting got more frequent, and well, we guess you're having a pirate problem, or a civil war, either one. Rain nods and looks almost impressed. Indeed. Members of the pirate Black Fleet have been making life difficult for us for the past few months. Despite my confidence that this problem will be solved, I lack the naval manpower to send dedicated fleets jumping around in dark space looking for pirates. I suppose this is where you come in. The Sirkin nods. Yes, we are more than happy to deal with the problem for you in its entirety. And the Sirkin, in a weirdly elegant fury of motion, produces some electronic scroll that, when unfurled by the Sirkin, reveals various red dots on a star map of the local systems. These are areas we do not go around here because, we get shot at. And I'll wager that these are the primary operating spots of this Black Fleet of yours. Ivan and Rain both nodding now, indeed sort of enjoying the nonchalant nature of the Sirkin. The Sirkin puts the map away and pops some pill from a tin in his jacket before looking at the men with wide eyes and a smile. This would be an easy task to accomplish. And a gesture of good faith, I'll even belay a starting payment in favor for later compensation based on time and happiness with services rendered. Rain gives a half chuckle before rising and walking over to a shelf behind Krukov. After retrieving a different tablet from a wall unit, he sits down near his general and gestures for him to speak. This isn't the only thing we'd like to purchase your services for. The Sirkin tilts his head, slightly confused, but intrigued. He nods. Go on. Ivan sighs deeply before regaling the tale of an entire space station wiped out by some unknown horror. Outworlders is what we're calling them, and the attacks are getting more and more frequent. Rain looked to the Sirkin, almost in some physical pain. And before long it will be impossible to stop the panic resulting from these demons. Ivan rises from his seat and brings the tablet Rain retrieved over to the Syrkin, and after only a few moments the Syrkin looks back to the men with a massive sharp-toothed grin. The pirate bullshit I can delegate, because this has my full attention. The Syrkin extends his hand out to the general, and then another out to Rain. After shaking on both and signing a few documents, the men in the room all seem fairly relaxed. A massive weight lifted off the shoulders of the Imperator and his most trusted advisor. And a new challenge, something near impossible for the Syrkins to rise to. Rain offers the Syrkin an Imperial cigar as the massive alien turns to leave. Feel free to enjoy the comforts of the red light district while we run this down the chain, Shajol. The Syrkin takes a small brown stick of tobacco and after smelling it, lights it. I most certainly will, Mr. Rain. After the alien leaves the office, the two men, exhausted from nearly the 14 hours of daily mess that is running the CIS, look to one another slumped in chairs before Ivan speaks. Not what I'd expect from first contact. Rain simply laughs. We just hired a group of four-armed lizard druggies, and I feel strangely confident about it. Ivan nods. Yeah, they are refreshing.